All right. Well, hopefully we'll have a few more ladies pop on here. If you have a question, you can just unmute yourself and ask it, or if you want, you can wait till the end. But I want to make sure that you guys get your questions answered, and that's my goal. So feel free, like I said, to unmute yourself and ask your question when it comes up. But I'm Shanna Bradley with Global Birth Community, and I just wanted to offer becoming a doula because I remember what it was like when I was getting ready to become a doula. I didn't know anybody within my circle of friends who was a doula that could answer questions for me. And I just kind of had to do trial and error and learn as I go. And I feel like there's some things that I could have learned more easily from someone. And so I want to be that for someone else. I want to be able to help you guys navigate all of the choices and decisions and hopefully make it a little bit easier as you make those choices that can really impact what it looks like to be a doula. So again, this is kind of your time to hopefully grow in that and get your questions answered from somebody who's been doing it for a long time so that you don't have to learn the hard way like I did. So this is my story. So I find this to be true in birth work as well. But I got married young. I graduated high school young and then got married shortly after that. And all my friends were going off to college, and we ended up starting a family really quickly. And so none of my friends had had kids. I was the first one. And I was young and I thought, hey, you just go to the hospital and you have a baby, and that's just how it works. And it'll all be perfect and happy and fine. And that was not the case for us. It was a very traumatic birth. And there was a complication at the end, but really it was just the way that I was treated, the way I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand my options. I wasn't given options. And so it was somewhat traumatic. It was traumatic, but it became even more traumatic after 2 years later, we had our second. And that birth was just boring, and it wasn't like crazy or chaotic. And I was like, that's so different. This is such a different birth experience. And I want to know why. And I was an EMT, I was an EMS for a long time. And I just thought, what made these two different? And I really started to just dive into birth and look at what that looks like and what can be done and what did I not know. And now we have 6 kids. We've had 8 pregnancies and 2 losses. And so I've had a lot of different birth experiences in the hospital, out of the hospital. And I just love birth and I love supporting women in that as well. But I do find that most doulas or women who are training or wanting to become doulas, they share a story like mine. So either they had a really traumatic birth and they don't want to see anyone else have a traumatic birth like that, or they had a very perfect, like beautiful, gentle birth, and they want everybody to have that birth. And so they encourage that and train that, and they come alongside women in that. So the overwhelming majority of doulas have had a bad birth experience or good birth experience that they want to share with others or avoid. And there is a small percentage of women that I work with and train and that have never given birth. So I've trained a lot of women graduating out of high school, early 20s, young to mid 20s, not married, no kids yet. And most of them have experienced birth in some way. So some of them have seen their mom give birth, some have seen their sister or their cousin give birth, or they just feel really called to birth work. But for the most part, most doulas have given birth and want to then get in the field. And so that's what I find to be true. So I would love for you guys at the end to like let me know, why you want to join and birth work and kind of what led you there. But what's the difference in doulas? So doula is the Greek word that means woman servant. So a woman serving a woman. And this was coined by archaeologists, actually. They had found ancient ruins with pictures of women supporting women during labor, and they knew that they weren't midwives, I guess. And so they were other supportive women. So they were trying to figure out, what are these women? What are they doing? And so these men went back to the Greek and they found doulos and doulas and doula. And so doulo is servant, like male servant, and doula is female servant. And so that's just what they call these women that they found artifacts about. And that's kind of where it started. So like in the late 60s, and then DONA started, which is Doulas of North America. And they were the first doula training. and they started training birth labor doulas. So birth doula, labor doula, same thing. And basically they are non-medical birth professionals that come alongside of women during pregnancy, birth, labor, and early postpartum. And so that's where they're doing education, they're getting them ready and prepped for birth, they're supporting them throughout the birth, generally what we think of as a doula. And then the next biggest, realm of doulas is postpartum doulas. And postpartum doulas have a really wide range. Birth doulas is pretty specific. Postpartum doulas can be a combination of things. They either support the mom, so they're helping with breastfeeding, they're helping the mom just get used to the newborn, they're chatting with them, they're helping them with light housework, or they're working with the newborn mostly, where they're helping feed, change, take care of the newborn so mom can rest. Or they're doing household chores, so they're cooking, cleaning, doing grocery runs, or some kind of combination of all three. So postpartum work can really look very different depending on your area and your personality and what you want to offer and what you don't want to offer. And so it's kind of a little bit of everything or very specific. So it depends on what you want to do. Bereavement and loss doulas, those come alongside for miscarriage. They come alongside for stillbirth, late miscarriages, early miscarriages, even like infant loss in that first year. So that is kind of a different special training to really come alongside grieving families. I didn't put this on here. I'm not sure why, but there's end of life doulas or grief doulas or hospice doulas. There's kind of a lot of different names again for those, but they come alongside of people at the end of their lives because the way we leave the earth is a lot like how we enter it. And so they come alongside in that way and serve that way and help them to be informed about decisions and all of that. Fertility. So we have doulas for fertility to help women to conceive. We have adoption doulas that come alongside the birth mom and the adoptive parents or one or the other. And so there's a lot of different kinds of doulas. So it started at birth and labor, and then it's kind of spread out from there because it really is a woman coming alongside of a woman in any transition of life. And so there's kind of a whole, they call it a whole spectrum of different opportunities there. So being on call, this is the one that I get asked a lot. So being on call, so I'm going to really speak to birth. That's really the one that you are. We call full term 37 to 42 weeks. So doulas are on call for those 5 weeks for each mom, which basically says that when you go into labor, I will be there within whatever X amount of time frame to support you. So some contracts are an hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever that looks like. So during the night, it's easy because you wake up and you don't really have to do anything. You just, look presentable and leave the house. And then during the day, though, you could be like in the middle of grocery shopping, 30 minutes from your house. So you need time to like check out, come home, get your stuff, run your kids somewhere, whatever that looks like. And so in your contract, there's a time frame. And generally moms let you know like, hey, this is happening. And they're not calling you like as soon as their first contraction, but they're letting you know the progress. And then at the point of needing more support, they call you and you show up. But if you take a client every 4 to 6 weeks and you're like a really light load, you're still on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 365 days because the on call is such a wide range. And so this is what I find to be the hardest thing for people, especially again, because most doulas have kids and they're young kids. And so childcare is the number one struggle for, there's two, childcare and burnout. So either doing too many births too fast and being burned out, or not having adequate on-call childcare, because that's super hard to get childcare on a normal day, let alone like drop in, I need someone right away. And so those are the biggest struggles of what I see in the birth world and in doulas, is trying to figure that out. Do you guys have any specific questions about on-call that you want to ask? Okay. So how do you choose your training? So I feel like this is kind of that first step that can really have a big impact on how your doula journey goes, because there's a lot of different ones that teach a lot of different things. And some different organizations, you're really like tied to the organization and their rules and regulations. So the first one really to kind of decide is your personality of how you want to do training. So Before, it was always traditionally in person. It's a very relational, hands-on job. And so it's best, an ideal world to learn it hands-on when you're like touching people and you're doing all of the things. Um, but since we know COVID kind of changed everything, there's a lot of online programs that you can take and learn just as well. But that wasn't really the case a few years ago. So do you want to do it online? Do you want to do it in person? There's also hybrid versions. And so I also offer a hybrid version once a year where you do part of your training online and then you do the second day or the second half of the training is in person, and doing the hands-on and all of the things. So there's also hybrid versions, a few out there. So do you want a classroom or do you want to be self-paced? So again, this is in person, it's obviously a classroom, but there's also online where it has specific times that you're doing like live classes with other classmates where it's very interactive. And then there is self-paced where you do, your own thing at your own time frame and your own schedule, which can work really well for people who are super motivated. But I do find that there are a lot of doulas who go through self-paced because of life, and that makes sense. And then they don't finish their training because there's not that accountability. So we have a hybrid version of that too. So we call it a flipped classroom approach where we do the best of both worlds that we think. So we have um, online classes and online lectures that you do first, and then you meet with a live classroom with an instructor and classmates and do activities and follow up what you just learned online that was self-paced. So it's the best of both worlds. There's some deadlines and some not deadlines. And so I just think that works really well for a lot of people. So that's an option too. There is hybrid flipped classroom approaches as well. So birth philosophy and language is kind of where you really want to start, or if you know that you specifically want online or in person, you can start there. But what you really want to, I guess, be most aware of is the birth philosophy of the organization that you're working with. So do they train you to really do a lot of hospital births? Do they train you to do mostly home births? Do they train you to really only support natural birth without medications and epidurals? Do they, cover like a wide range of things, or are they very like niche and specific? A lot of training now are like saying birthing person, partner, chest feeding, body feeding, and they don't say things like woman, mother, um, husband, like, so you kind of, depending on your beliefs or how you feel, some people are fine with whatever language, some people specifically want this language or that language. And so knowing what they teach, and how they teach it. So the birth philosophy can also tie into some are more new age, some are more feminist, some are more liberal, and some are more advocacy. Some don't believe in advocacy at all for doulas. And so you just kind of have to see like what that underlining theme and philosophy is on, that's going to run through the whole training. So you can ask a lot of questions. I really encourage you to do that. If it's not really clear on the website or in the materials, maybe dig a little deeper of like where it's all rooted, making sure that like women have full autonomy in their birth. Some of them, this is the other big one for organizations, especially the really big mega ones that have been around since 60s, 70s. They now have forms that you sign after training saying that you agree to doing these things and you agree to not do any of these things. And I've had a lot of people come to me who don't feel comfortable signing those because they don't agree with this or they don't agree with that. And they find themselves wanting to realign with a different organization. So I don't want you to like not know what you're getting into and then get through their training and then be like, oh, I didn't know I had to sign this, agreements of what I do and don't do. Some organizations say, hey, attend unassisted births where you're the only person there. And other organizations say, no, 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 you cannot attend an unassisted birth and you cannot be the only one there. So all those things in between, make sure you know what the end result looks like and what you might have to sign. Time frame and requirements. So that's another thing that kind of depends on if you're doing something that's self-paced versus something that's more scheduled, like a classroom. Does it have like time frames where you're paying, if it's self-paced, do you get it for a lifetime? Do you get it for 6 months? Do you get it for 12 months? Once you start, do you have, 1 year to 2 years to complete all of your certification requirements? Or is it open-ended? Again, I find that a lot of women who go open-ended sometimes tend to get busy with life and their families and kids, and they don't always finish. So I encourage, if you're going to do something self-paced, or if you're going to do something that is like lifetime, to give yourself deadlines. Just, I know that works really well for me and my family, to like, even if someone else doesn't give it to me, I personally give it to myself so that I can get it done, in a timely manner. So I suggest that. And then costs. So costs can really vary from, really like $500 to $2,000. And again, that kind of depends on if it's in person or online, if it's, if there's an instructor, not an instructor. But I would say really 600 is maybe the cheapest I've ever seen. And then I would say the average is that 8 to 1,000, and then it goes up from there. So it kind of depends what the training all entails and how big of a training organization it is and all of those things. Also look for fees. So most organizations, at least the big ones, have every 2 to 3 years you recertify. So you have to do continuing ed hours, you have to do all these different things, and then you pay a fee to continue to get recertified. And that's a cost as well. So kind of take into account if there's recertification and what that looks like, if you're paying that $600, $200 every couple years, or is it a one and done? So look and think about that as well. So what do I charge as a doula? So that really depends on where you live and how big the city is. So we live in a smaller city in Indiana that's about 600,000 people. And people here really charge between $700 and $1,000. But if you go to Indianapolis, so we're the second largest city in the state. If you go to our capital, Indianapolis, they start more at like 12, 1,500 a birth. So it really depends on cost of living. So if you're in a more rural area, you're talking probably 800 to 1,000 plus. And if you're in a major city, like you go out to California, they're easily starting at $2,000 a birth. So New York, they can start easily at $2,000 a birth. So it really depends on your area, and being able to figure out what that looks like by looking up other doulas, asking other doulas. And then what your packages are. So a lot of doulas offer multiple different levels of packages, cheaper, middle range, higher ends. You can add in more, visits. You can add in childbirth education, encapsulation, all of these different things that you will learn and grow your business. You can add those in and then have higher packages, premium packages, things like that. And so it really depends on your goal of how many clients you want to take, and do you want to do full-time or part-time? So being a labor doula or a birth doula, it's really hard to start off out the gate and be full-time, because you kind of have to build that up, and you can't really predict birth. So it's hard to take on, a ton of births all at the same time until you feel like you have all of those other things in place to be able to handle that. And it just takes time, like any business, because you are self-employed, to be able to build up those clients and build up that word of mouth and build up a business where you're going to have multiple clients at a time to be able to cover a full-time job. So most doulas start at part-time, and a lot of them stay at part-time because they have kids and things like that. If you want to think more full-time, I always suggest going postpartum first. Postpartum is scheduled, so you're not on call. You schedule it all, and it's a job that you can write into your contract that, hey, if I get called to a birth, then the hours that I miss now, I will tack onto the end of our contract. And so it's one of the rare jobs that you can usually just up and leave and go to a birth, because they understand, what you do. So that's the other hard thing, is if you have a different job, most jobs you can't just like call in or leave at a short notice. So it's sometimes hard to get into birth work if you need that income right now. But if you have more flexibility, it's easy to then build that up as you go. So like I said, childcare is the biggest thing. What do you do for childcare? Do you have, is your husband working from home? Do you have relatives close by? Do you have a friend that lives nearby? Like, what does that look like? Because figuring out that is going to be key to be able to have a well-oiled machine when you get that call, if you have little ones or school or whatever that looks like to work around their schedules. So a little bit more about me. This is my family. And my program is created to birth. And really, it's training that comes alongside of women from all communities and cultures to be able to train them up to be able to use to be able to be doulas and be childbirth educators, to be able to really inform within their own communities and support within their own communities. So I do that locally. I have a nonprofit birth organization. I work with immigrants and refugees locally, and we offer doula services and childbirth ed. And then I train doulas online and overseas. We're about to go to the Philippines in 2 weeks and train up a group of future doulas, midwives, and nurses in all of the comfort measures and all the things that we do. And so I just think that birth work is just amazing. And I love the opportunity to train up more ladies to do the same thing. And so, yeah, that's kind of the gist of everything. And so I'm open to whatever questions that you guys have, and then I'll share a little bit more. So what questions? Let me pull you guys back up. Did you guys not hear that at all? Oh my goodness. Can someone hop on and let me know? Can you hear me? Okay. You made me super nervous. Okay, great. Then I will let you know this real quick, and then you can ask me all your questions. Let me move that back out of the way real quick. So I just want to share this with you, and then if you guys want to get off or need to get off. So is now the right time? So if you are local or if you aren't local, but I do offer a couple trainings that are coming up. So birth doula training is April 1st. So it's every Monday night in April. We have a live Zoom from 7 to 9, and then we have portal online that you do in between. And then postpartum doula always follows it the next month, and it's Monday nights in May, and it's the same idea. And then we have an in-person hybrid that will be June 8th in Fort Wayne, Indiana as well. So we offer birth doula training and postpartum doula training on rotation. So we always offer birth, then doula, or birth, doula, and then postpartum the next month, because a lot of women want to take both. And I saw that a lot of you want to take both. So I decided to give you guys a bundle deal. So if you take birth, it is $550 basically. It's $549. And then if you do the postpartum, it's $449. But if you want to do both of them back to back, because you guys join me tonight, it's normally a bundle of $799. But I want to give you the deal of $699 if you guys are interested. And that is the code. It's QA bundle. And I'll send that all out in the email, so you don't have to remember that. But I do want to offer that to you guys if what we do as our group is a good fit for you, and I can tell you more about what makes us a little different. So Fort Wayne. Yep, Fort Wayne, Indiana. So what other questions do you have? So I'll tell you how ours is different. Basically, we use traditional language. So we use mom, we use breastfeeding, and so we don't shy away from that. And we also see birth work as really a calling and something that we're really called to come alongside women and do. And I see it as really my ministry and part of what my family does as a ministry. And I just think that watching birth every time is a miracle, of just seeing a newborn baby just breathe for the first time. And so all the training that I do, our global birth community is a Christian faith-based training. And you can see that and get the feel for that on our website. But not all trainings are Christian, not all trainings are faith-based, but ours is, because I do believe in just using this as a time to really come alongside of women and care for them and love them well. And so that's how we do it. But again, figuring that out for you and figuring out what is the best organization is really key to really having a good, successful training and foundation for your birth work. So the hybrid is only for the birth. So the hybrid in person is only for the birth. So we don't offer postpartum yet. But if we had enough people, we could do that. And some of what we're doing in postpartum, in person, is also crossover to the postpartum. So kind of, we're going to do a lot of breastfeeding training in person. And so a lot of that goes into what you would learn in the lactation part of the postpartum training as well. So they really do have an overlap. But the biggest part of birth work and doing that in person and learning that in person is hands-on and doing the positions and helping women to have those comfort measures and reduce that pain. And so it makes sense to like do as much of that hands-on comfort measures and things in person, where a lot of the postpartum work can be easier done like through videos or like self-paced, if that makes sense. But if we had enough, I would be happy to do that. What other questions do you guys have? Yes. So it's in May and it's online. So it will be, I didn't think this all the way through, but it is. So we just had one in February, and then it'll be May, and then it'll be August, and then it will be, I think, October. So I don't think there's going to be a break in the fall so that we can get in a fourth training. So it's usually every third month. And then it's kind of back to back in the fall. So May is the next postpartum. Yeah. So what are the benefits to certification? Um, so doula work is interesting. It is not regulated by an overseeing national body yet. Each state, if you want Medicaid reimbursement, each state has different rules and regulations for what that looks like and how they define that. But outside of Medicaid, there is no actual giant certification body. So therefore, certification is an option, and it depends on who you're working with. So some hospitals on East Coast and West Coast, those are the only areas I've heard, but different hospitals on different coasts actually are requiring specific certifications and vendor access. So you actually have to like prove to them different things. Some hospitals, very few, but some hospitals like on the East and West Coast require you to go through their training because they see that sometimes doulas interfere with what they're trying to do and the process that they want birth to go. And so now they're kind of making up their own rules. But for the overwhelming majority, certification, the benefit to it is COVID changed the fact that you could walk in and call yourself a doula. And since COVID, because actually during COVID, most hospitals banned anybody except for one support person, such as like a husband or the dad or whatever. And then hospitals started requiring certification because people would just say, oh, I'm their doula. And they're like, I think you're their sister, or I think you're their best friend. And so then now for a while, I haven't seen it as strongly as it was during COVID and things in like 2020, 21, 22, where you had to show proof. But a lot of hospitals now will require proof of certification in order to come in, especially during like cold and flu season. If there's any restrictions, they're going to most likely require the certification proof. But there is none specifically because there's not, like I said, a specific licensure. But certification can also, you generally always have to be certified to get Medicaid reimbursement and things like that as well. So kind of just depends on what that looks like, but every state is different in their Medicaid reimbursement. But there is no like specific, like you have to certify unless the hospital requires you to. If I sign up to train now, would I need to start it right away? I have a 4-month-old, so I can't leave her. Yeah, so you can definitely you can sign up whenever and start whenever. But the live classes, like I said, are either Monday nights in April or May. and or both. And you don't have to be on camera the whole time, especially if you're breastfeeding. So that is totally fine. I literally always have at least one, if not several, breastfeeding moms during my classes that, just take the camera off while they're breastfeeding, and or they have, a little kid with them, and that's not a big deal. Like I said, we have 6 kids, so I totally get having a kid with you. And my 7-year-old loves to always see if she's anywhere around or can hear that I'm on like a Zoom. She wants to like come and watch and see who I'm talking to. So kids are totally, welcome in your world. And part of sitting in on the training, or, I get it. I get what that's like for sure to have kids. Our youngest is only 11 months as well. So luckily, some of the older kids entertain her most of the time, but you can totally, cut off camera. And then if you go to a birth or something like that, because some women are already attending births, but if you have something that comes up, or you can't make a training that's live, then we do record them all and you can make it up. Yeah. Keeping your camera off because you're breastfeeding. Totally get it. What other questions do you ladies have? So well, I know none of you guys have your cameras on, but if you want to unmute yourself and let me know what kind of brought you to wanting to consider being a doula. Did you have a traumatic birth? Did you have an amazing, beautiful birth? Have you not had kids yet, but you just love things all birth? Like, what does that look like for you guys? I'm interested to know kind of your journey of like bringing you here.
Hi, I'm Betsy.
Where
Can
you?
you hear?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where are you from, Betsy?
Oh, okay. I live in Arizona.
Okay.
Yeah, so I loved to watch the show The Birth Story, I think it was called, on TLC.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, and they had an episode where they featured a family that used a doula. I think she was hired by the hospital. And I was like, "Oh my goodness, that's a job. I would love that job."
Yeah.
um, but I ended up not pursuing that. I got married and had a family, and I used a doula for my first birth. I wanted a home birth, but I ended up, um, for many reasons, having the baby in the hospital, planning to have the baby in the hospital. And so I had a doula. Um, and that was the only time I ever used a doula, but it's always been something that I'd wanted to pursue once I could leave my kids. Like you said, the childcare is a
Yeah.
major issue. So now I have older kids, that I can just leave the baby with, and it's not a big deal. So I'm looking into possibly becoming a doula.
Awesome. How many kids do you have?
I have 6.
Ah, okay. Do you guys
So yeah,
homeschool?
yeah, we do.
Okay, so do we. Awesome.
Yeah.
Where are you in Arizona? Like, are you in a big city or are you more rural? What does that look
Um,
like?
it's a moderate sized city. It's called Prescott. So kind of south of Flagstaff, in between
Okay.
Flagstaff and Phoenix. So
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome. Thanks for sharing.
yeah. Thank you.
What other questions? I try to cover most of them, but I know, like I said, every place is different and unique. Um, as far as like where you live, the cost of living, how saturated the birth world is. So either you have a ton of doulas or nobody knows what a doula is. And so those can be challenges as well. Um, and kind of looking at your trainings too, do they offer business training? So some are very business oriented where they're like, this is such a business, this is all business, and some are very like, this is all very relational, it's about relationships, it's about caring and loving, those women well. And then, there's a combination of, here's how you run your own business, here is, some business training, but not like this is only business. This is relational and business. So we fall in the middle of being very relational, but also, this is how you make money and how you can do that. We also talk a lot about how to utilize a fund or a foundation that you kind of have your own, where you set money aside from each birth. So you can kind of do scholarships, or you can do sliding scale births, to depending on who you support in your demographic. So I take on private clients that can pay full price, but I also take on immigrants, refugees, teen moms, single moms who can't pay that full rate, as well. And so we talk about how you can navigate that too. That's a great question because I didn't answer that. We do not have recertification. So we believe that we want to make this as accessible as possible. And we train doulas all over the world. We take 1 to 2 trips a year and train up doulas in their own country. And so it didn't make sense to have recertification in our opinion, because it's just that fee. And really for big organizations, it's really, it's just a fee that they want to keep collecting that money. And so we do not. It is a lifetime certification. And we know that if you love this work, that you will continue to continue to learn. You'll take other trainings, you will read, there's so many trainings out there. And once you start this, you're like, oh, I want to take that. And oh, I want to learn that. And how do I get better at this thing? And so you'll do it. You'll do it on your own. You don't need someone to, make you do it. But yeah, so that's a great question. I did not tell you that. Yeah. So you're in Fort Wayne. How saturated is the market? And I have heard so many. Yeah. So Fort Wayne, like I said, since we're not a super big area, we do have 4 hospitals, and birth is talked about a lot here. But we do have a lot of doulas, honestly, for our area. But the ones who like are serious and who practice and want income coming in on a regular basis, do pretty well because we have more and more women. Basically, women, what do we do? When we have a great experience or when we love something or we hate it, we share that with everybody. So if we have a favorite restaurant, if we have a favorite whatever. And so that's true with birth work and doulas. And so people will say, hey, like I had a doula, it was so great. Like you should have a doula. And then they tell all their friends. And so that has really grown here in the last few years. And so there is definitely room for more doulas, but we do have a lot of them compared to our city size. But different doulas offer different things. But really, people are hiring you. They're hiring your personality. Yes, they're hiring you for like your skills and what you offer. But when they have like 5 doulas to choose from, I tell women this all the time. Like you're choosing personality. You're choosing the person that you feel comfortable with, that you're going to want in your birth space, that you're going to feel safe with, who share similar beliefs or whatever that looks like. You need somebody who brings that calming presence, and personality is a big aspect to that. So if you are younger and you have friends that are still giving birth, then it's pretty much a for sure that your friends are going to be like, hey, I want you at my birth, and ask you all of these birth questions, and see that you are awesome in that field. And so yes, I would say we have a lot of doulas here, but we also have some of our top doulas. I guess this is public information now, but some of our top busiest swamped doulas are leaving doula work to actually train as midwives. And so that is happening very soon. And so that literally opens up a lot of births for a lot of people because these ladies are crazy busy, full all the time. And those women are going to be looking somewhere else. And so there's definitely opportunity. And it does take a little time, but we have different groups that you can kind of join and be mentored or learn from or do events with. So it's not standalone. So some cities, we don't have one. My nonprofit birth organization is the closest thing, but some cities have agencies. So if you're in a bigger city, like Phoenix, most likely would have agencies. Texas has agencies, Florida, a lot of different places that have big cities have doula agencies for birth and postpartum. So you could potentially go work for one of those and get experience and build that confidence. But for the most part, doulas are small business, individually owned, and you kind of have to figure that part out too as you go. So we don't yet. We hope to. So it's kind of like that's so childbirth education and lactation is the next two things that we'll be rolling out so that you can advance those skills and learn those things. We do touch on a lot of breastfeeding and birth and even more in postpartum, but there will be eventually a course, and I'm working with a local IBCLC she trains locally and she trains internationally. She just came back from Colombia, training up women in breastfeeding and lactation. And so I'm working with her to get that figured out because we definitely need more of that. So I will say birth doulas are there's a lot of birth doulas here, but there's still availability for sure. But postpartum work here in most places in the US need postpartum doulas. Women are, coming around and finally wanting that and asking for that, and there just isn't enough postpartum doulas. That's very true here. That's also true with lactation. So being able to provide that lactation support is being requested more and more, and people just there isn't enough trained women to be able to go out and do that. So yeah. Yes, Sarah. Sarah's great. Sarah sits on the board of our nonprofit, and I love Sarah. And Sarah generally, so our in-person training that we're offering, she usually comes and teaches lactation, but she is busy that day. And so I'm super sad about that. But yes, Sarah. Sarah is my IBCLC that helps us with all sorts of things, and she's very like-minded. So I just love her. We definitely need more Sarahs. What other questions? So what do you guys think about what is the biggest barrier for you? If you think you want to be a doula, um, why haven't you done that yet? So is it childcare? Is it like cost of training? Is it what does that look like? Money, yeah. Yes, she is awesome too. So you must be from Fort Wayne too. Um, yes. So I've never met her in person, but she is awesome what she does. I wish she was closer. She does a lot with like the Michiana group and not as much the Fort Wayne group. So having somebody like her doing the same thing, she just opened her little like office, right? And so cute. So having something like that. So Sarah and Tina are amazing here and what they do. But we could definitely have more lactation consultants doing things that they can do, not being IBCLCs and nurses. So that would be great to see that. So yeah, when I can nail Sarah down a little bit longer to get her to help me with finishing that training and hopefully I'm hoping she'll teach some of it, then we will have that soon. So an IBCLC, for anybody who doesn't know, is an international board certified lactation consultant, and they're the highest level of education for lactation. They're generally nurses because you need over 1,000 hours of one-on-one breastfeeding support with clients, and so that's really hard to do outside of a hospital setting or a clinical setting. But there are lower levels that you could start with that kind of build up to that as well. So. Right. Okay. I do remember seeing that. Awesome. Yeah. So we have Indiana. Who else do we have on here? Does postpartum care include newborn care, or is that a separate thing? So we call it postpartum and newborn care specialists, but we shorten it to PD and S. So postpartum, doula, newborn specialist, just because it's a whole lot of letters. But it does focus on both. So it focuses on what we traditionally think of as a postpartum doula supporting the mom, and then which is lactation and things like that. And then it goes into supporting and caring for a newborn as well. So that's where that part comes in. So sometimes we call it postpartum doula training. Sometimes we call it newborn specialist training. Sometimes they call it newborn care special, like just there's a bunch of different names. Um, what was the one I saw the other day? But we kind of have a combination. So they're very overlapping. So it doesn't make sense to like have two separate trainings. So we combine them so that you can do mom, baby combination, whatever it is that you want to do within that. Yeah. It just seemed really weird to have like separate trainings for it. So but yeah, we definitely need more postpartum doulas in Fort Wayne. Is it usually harder to find clients who want to hire you if you are new to birth work? So it really depends. So if you go with the traditional larger organizations that have been around a long time, they used to say provide 3 discounted or free training births, and they would require births. So I guess we didn't talk about that. They would require 3 training births in order to certify. And so they would offer their packages, for next to nothing or free. And then more organizations came in and they're like, hey, you're trained, you have that, advanced training, you shouldn't offer it for free. And so that kind of changed the game. And so it kind of depends. So we encourage and we kind of walk through how to network, how to get those first couple clients. Um, but it's kind of like anything else where, in my opinion, I'm not, so say our rate is $1,000. I'm not at $1,000 out the door because I just have not seen birth or very many births. And so to me, it makes sense to start at a certain level and then work up to that more experienced number that everyone else is charging. You can, but if you do start at a lower, rate, not free, but if you start at a lower rate and say, hey, like these are my first certifying births, or these are my training births, or just I'm a new doula and getting started, or whatever that looks like, you can do it that way. We have locally and most places have networking opportunities to meet clients and things like that. Some people offer their same service like right out the door at market value. So it really depends on where you live and your personality, and we can talk through some of that. um but most of the time I would say you start a little less, and that helps you for those families that are like, hey, like I can't maybe do $1,000, but there's a doula that's only 750. That's more in our budget. And then you do get those clients to build that confidence and to build those skills. And then as you get busier, then you raise those rates to the going rates. And so, yeah, does that answer your question? So our organization does not require certifying births. And the reason is because, um, well, it kind of changed with COVID anyways, but most organizations now don't require them because in order to get into the hospitals, you have to show proof of certification. So if you are required to have so many births to get certified, how do you get to those births if you're being asked to go to the hospital? So that really limited you only to home birth and birth centers that allowed. And so that was very, very limiting. And so it didn't make sense for us to make it nearly impossible, especially during COVID, it was nearly impossible to get those certifying births. So again, this is the foundational training, and you will go on to grow your skills and more trainings and things like that as you do more births. But you are trained to provide that care or provide that service. So we don't require certifying births. And more organizations are going away from that because you have to show proof. So like I said, there are networking or like networking events too that help you to find those clients. And I have some strategies that I help the doulas do. Um, Once you get those first couple, I would say those first 3 are really confident boosting. And once people know like what you do, um, you'll get more clients. And then once those clients tell their friends, you'll get more clients. The number one way doulas get more clients is from referrals. And like I said, women love to share what they love. And so that's a big one for sure. And then you can build clienteles from networking and doing different events and things like that, and working with local people who do similar work. So chiropractors or you know, what else? Like that's a big one. Chiropractors, pelvic floor therapists, physical therapy, birth centers, midwives, providers, whatever that looks like as well. I would say it's always hard because you're nervous for those first couple births, but after that and you get your feet wet, you're so passionate about it that you stop being nervous. So, and like I said, if you are still in those childbearing years and your friends are in childbearing years, then you usually find people pretty easily to start. And if you do have like a lower rate, you'll definitely have people coming to you. How similar is a doulaing and midwifery? So, okay, great question. So this gets confused a lot, especially when I'm talking to different people that don't have anything to do with birth work. But a doula is a trained non-medical professional. So they're kind of like experts on birth from a non-medical perspective. So comfort measures, walking alongside women, being more like birth coaches, birth companions, where a midwife is trained in the medical aspects. So doulas, like I said, they provide physical, emotional, educational, and advocacy support. They don't do they don't do fetal monitoring. They don't use Dopplers. They don't do cervical exams. They don't do blood pressures. They don't do vitals. They don't chart. They don't do any of those things. So they're caring for the mom well and helping her to cope and coaching her through, but they're not monitoring mom and baby, if that makes sense. But a lot of your training is medical related so that you understand the options, you understand the interventions, you understand what is happening, but you don't give medical advice. Midwives, it depends on state to state. There's two kinds of midwives generally. There's nurses that become midwives, and then there's home birth midwives, which are called CPMs, who don't work in the hospital, and then CNMs, which are the certified nurse midwives that work in hospitals. So those have nursing background, and then they go on to get their master's degree as midwives, which is what we have locally in all of our hospitals. And then a CPM in our birth center, and our CPMs are certified practicing midwives, and they are the ones who do our home births, and they don't have the nursing background. And so they do straight midwifery school. And so, yeah, so that's the difference is they get paid a lot more and they're the providers. They're more like OBs. They're basically like OBs who can't do C-sections. And doulas are birth companions, birth coaches coming alongside for comfort and supporting them that way. And yeah, so that's the difference. So a lot of midwives have doula skills. But if you're in the hospital or even at home, they're, busy doing all the medical things that they don't necessarily have the time or the ability to do all the hands-on stuff. So some do, some don't. Some can when they can. But you are a chosen, consistent care that comes alongside of them. So at least locally, there's only one practice, and this is very rare, that offers your choice of provider that is almost guaranteed to be there. So we have one practice that's great, that's very holistic, very natural. It has midwives, it has 4 to 6 midwives, it just depends. But when you go in there, when you go into labor, you get whatever midwife is on call. You don't get to choose. And I really think that all my clients have like one that they love and one that they really don't want at their birth, and everybody else is fine, one way or the other. And so that's hard. And then when you hire a home birth midwife, we have a local midwife who it's a 2-person practice. So you have a 50-50 chance of getting the midwife that you like the most. Um, so, um, so you don't always get to choose there. And then when you work with OBs, at least locally here, all the OBs work in joint practices. And so again, there's 4 to 6 to 8 or 12 different doctors. So you get whatever doctor's on call. And so you don't get a pick. So a birth doula is the one person that is part of your birth team that you get a pick, that will be there, that knows what you want and what you don't want, who you've gone over all these things with and you feel comfortable with, and it's a guaranteed like person. On average, this is pre-COVID statistics, but on average, pre-COVID, you saw and met 6.25 new people when in labor. So new nurses, new, you know, register, like all the people coming in and out of your hospital room, 6.25. Now that number is even higher since COVID. Doulas don't shift change unless you work with an organization, you are with them the whole time. Organizations sometimes have shift doulas where you do change, or hospital-based programs, they have shift change. But independent doulas do not have shift change. And so if their birth is 16 hours, you're there the whole time versus their nurses might have changed once, twice, whatever that looks like. And so you give that continuous care and support that they choose and they know for sure you're going to be there. And so that's a big reason why people want doulas as well, because they know who they're getting. How long postpartum do you stay involved with the mom and baby? So that really depends. So as a birth doula, generally I am meeting with them postpartum within those first couple days to that first week, whenever they're ready to like have visitors. And I do 1 to 2 postpartums, and then I still do like calling and texting and checking in on them really for that first 6 weeks. But I do make myself available for them if they reach out, past that. But usually those first 2 weeks are when you're having the interaction, and then it kind of dwindles after that. And then postpartum work usually starts when the spouse or husband or mother-in-law or mother, whoever, returns to work or goes home. And so you usually start supporting women 1 to 2 weeks postpartum. And then that contract can be 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months. It really depends on what the family needs. Um, but yeah, some clients you click with really, really well, and you're like, "Oh, they're so great." And like you talk to them and they give you updates, and sometimes they'll send you, first birthday photos and things like that. And some clients you never hear from ever again. And so it kind of varies on that relationship. And some doulas are very relational and they're open to that. And other ones, like I said, are very like, this is a business transaction. This is when our time is done. So you can tweak that for what works for you. But I don't find I've never felt like I've had a client that was overwhelming and needy. I have heard other people feel that way, where they're like, oh, they just text me all the time, or like they're still texting me. But I don't know. I have not ever had that problem in all my clients. So um, yeah. So I like being relational and being there for them. I have a refugee mom who she's a single mom. She's doing this on her own because her husband's still in Pakistan. And there's an immigration issue. And so baby was born in October, and I still talk to her every once in a while because she just doesn't have that same circle of support. But I choose to do that as something that I want to do. But so sometimes you have clients like that, but most of them you don't really talk too much after those first 2 to 6 weeks. Yeah, so about 100. I'm not the busiest by choice. We take a lot of international trips, and I've had 2 babies since I started doula work. And so I've taken time off for those. And then running the nonprofit, I've trained up a lot of doulas. Um, and I started midwifery school. And so that kind of changed dynamics as well. So some doulas will do, like super busy doulas can do 20 to 30 births a year. I do usually 10 to 12 to 15 births a year, but February I did 6 births. But that was unusual because I was kind of just schedule was changing with being international and things like that. So but I would say most doulas attend 1 to 4 births a month. Once you do more than 4, it gets really overwhelming to do all the prenatals, postpartums, keep everybody like straight, making sure births don't happen at the same time. I would say most people do 1 to 2. And then if you want to be more full time, you're talking more like 3 to 4. But then after that, it can get really like iffy if you have 2 women in labor at the same time. And so yeah, that's kind of like the normal is 1 to 2. You're kind of in that 1 to 2 range, or you're in that 3 to 4 range. But like I said, for a long time, I was just training up doulas and I wasn't attending as many births. And so mine's been a little bit slower than some others, just because I have a bazillion things on my list. But yeah. What else are you guys thinking? If you do think of any questions that we didn't answer, because I know how it is when you wake up the next day and you're like, darn, I didn't ask that. Feel free to just email me and I will answer your questions. And then, yeah, if you have any questions about our training, you want to know anything more, or if you want to get in on that bundle deal, like I will send out an email with the links to the recording and that code and any other, any other pertinent information. But if you have questions, let me know. And if you are local, I'm more than happy to meet with you guys on Saturday morning at the coffee shop and kind of explain specifically what things look like locally and even what that training will look like locally. So I really appreciate you ladies coming and hanging out. And I hope you guys have more information to make the right decision for you. And I'm really as available as I can be. So reach out, email me if you have other questions that come along, and I would love to support you in whatever ways I can. You're welcome.